Marcus had been trying to ignore the sounds coming from the trunk, but now, those sounds were clearly asking for help. The sun was setting behind the Rocky Mountains as Marcus stood at the edge of Highway 70 outside Denver, his weathered backpack slung over one shoulder. His wavy brown hair caught the golden light, and his blue-green eyes scanned the sparse evening traffic hopefully. He'd been waiting for nearly 3 hours, and the temperature was dropping fast with the approaching darkness. When the silver SUV pulled over, Marcus felt a surge of relief. The vehicle looked clean and well-maintained, suggesting a responsible driver who might actually get him safely to his destination. The driver rolled down his window, a man in his 30s with dark hair and an expensive-looking jacket. His smile seemed friendly enough, though there was something slightly strained about his expression. "Where you headed?" the driver asked. "West toward Grand Junction." "If you're going that way," Marcus replied, approaching the passenger door. "Perfect timing. I'm driving straight through. Name's Derek." Marcus climbed into the passenger seat, immediately noticing the SUV's immaculate interior. Everything was spotless, except for a faint chemical smell that reminded him of cleaning supplies or maybe medical disinfectant. "Thanks for stopping. I'm Marcus." But as they pulled back onto the highway, Marcus began to notice things that didn't quite add up. Derek drove with unusual precision, maintaining exactly the speed limit and avoiding any sudden movements. His hands gripped the steering wheel with the kind of tension that suggested he was carrying something fragile or dangerous. More concerning was the way Derek kept glancing at the dashboard clock and then at his GPS, as if he were operating on a very tight schedule. "Long drive ahead," Marcus said, trying to make conversation. "About 4 hours," Derek replied tersely, then immediately turned up the radio volume. The music was loud enough to make conversation difficult, which struck Marcus as odd behavior for someone who had willingly picked up a hitchhiker. 20 minutes into the drive, Marcus heard it for the first time, a soft thumping sound from the back of the SUV. It was rhythmic but irregular, like someone tapping against metal or plastic. Marcus turned slightly in his seat, trying to see into the cargo area, but Derek had installed a privacy screen that blocked the view. "Did you hear that?" Marcus asked. "Hear what?" Derek's response was too quick, too defensive. "That thumping sound from the back. Probably just something shifting around. I've got some equipment back there." But the sound continued intermittently, and Marcus began to notice that it seemed to follow a pattern. 3 quick taps, pause, 3 quick taps, pause. It was almost like Morse code, or like someone trying to communicate. Derek turned the music up, even louder, clearly trying to mask the sounds. "What kind of equipment?" Marcus asked. "Photography gear. Cameras, tripods, that sort of thing." But Marcus had worked with photographers before, and camera equipment didn't make rhythmic tapping sounds. As they drove through the mountain passes, the tapping became more frequent and more urgent. Marcus pretended to doze off, allowing him to listen more carefully without Derek noticing his attention. The sounds were definitely not random. They followed patterns that suggested intelligence behind them. When Derek stopped for gas at a remote station, Marcus offered to help fill the tank while Derek went inside to pay. "No need," Derek said quickly. "I'll handle it. Just stay in the car." Derek's insistence that Marcus remain in the vehicle while he was alone with the SUV raised every alarm bell Marcus had developed during months of hitchhiking. While Derek was inside the station, Marcus heard the sounds again. But this time they were accompanied by something that made his blood run cold. A muffled voice, barely audible over the radio, but unmistakably human. Someone was saying something that sounded like help or please. Marcus's mind raced through possibilities. Drug smuggling, human trafficking, kidnapping. When Derek returned, his demeanor had shifted. He seemed more nervous, more agitated. "Everything okay?" Marcus asked. "Fine. Just tired." But Derek's hands were shaking slightly as he started the engine, and he kept checking his phone with increasing frequency. The sounds from the cargo area were becoming impossible to ignore. As they climbed higher into the mountains, the tapping became almost frantic. 3 taps, pause. 2 taps, pause. 3 taps. Over and over, like someone desperately trying to communicate. Marcus realized he was trapped in a vehicle with someone who was almost certainly transporting a human being against their will. Derek, I need to ask you something straight up. Is there someone in the back of this SUV? Derek's reaction was immediate and telling. He nearly swerved off the road before correcting course. What kind of question is that? The kind where I need a straight answer. Because if there's someone back there who needs help, I'm not going to pretend I don't know about it. Derek pulled over at a scenic overlook, his face pale in the dashboard lights. Marcus, you need to understand something. This isn't what it looks like. Then tell me what it is. Derek sat in silence for several minutes, clearly wrestling with how much to reveal. There is someone in the back, he finally admitted. Marcus felt his stomach drop. Who? My brother. The answer wasn't what Marcus had expected. Your brother? Why is your brother tied up in the back of your SUV? He's not tied up, he's sick. Derek explained that his brother Michael had been struggling with severe mental illness and drug addiction for several years. 3 days ago, he had a complete psychotic break. He was threatening to hurt himself and other people. Why didn't you take him to a hospital? I tried. But he ran away from 2 different psychiatric facilities. This is the only way I could get him to the treatment center in California that might actually be able to help him. Derek's story sounded plausible. But Marcus had learned to be skeptical of explanations that seemed too convenient. Derek, if this is legitimate, why all the secrecy? Why didn't you just tell me from the beginning? Because most people wouldn't get in a car if they knew there was a mentally ill person in the back, even if that person was secured and getting help. But Marcus needed more proof than Derek's word. I want to see him. I want to talk to your brother. Derek's hesitation was telling. He's sedated. The doctors gave him medication to keep him calm during transport. Then it shouldn't be a problem for me to see that he's okay. Derek reluctantly agreed to open the back of the SUV. But his body language suggested he was making a decision he didn't want to make. When Derek opened the rear hatch, Marcus saw a scene that was both better and worse than he had feared. There was indeed a young man in the cargo area, lying on what appeared to be a medical transport stretcher. He was conscious but clearly disoriented, with restraints that looked more medical than criminal. Michael, Derek said gently. This is Marcus. He's riding with us to California. Michael looked at Marcus with eyes that were unfocused but not afraid. Are you a doctor? No, I'm just a friend of your brother's. But something about the situation still felt wrong to Marcus. Michael appeared to be in genuine medical distress. But the setup in the back of the SUV looked more professional than what a family member would typically arrange. Derek, what kind of treatment facility are you taking him to? A private psychiatric hospital that specializes in dual diagnosis, mental illness and addiction. Derek showed Marcus brochures and medical paperwork that appeared legitimate, but Marcus noticed that Derek's hands were still shaking. Why are you so nervous if this is all legitimate? Derek's composure finally cracked. Because I'm not supposed to be transporting him like this. The truth was more complicated than Derek had initially revealed. Michael is supposed to be in police custody. He was arrested 3 days ago for assault during his psychotic episode. Derek explained that he had convinced the authorities to release Michael to his custody for medical transport, but the arrangement was unofficial and potentially illegal. If we get stopped by police, I could be charged with interfering with a criminal investigation. Marcus realized that Derek's nervousness wasn't because he was committing a crime, but because he was bending rules to help his brother get treatment instead of going to jail. Derek, what happens if you get caught? I go to jail, and Michael goes to prison instead of getting the help he needs. But the situation was about to become even more complicated. Derek's phone rang and Marcus could hear shouting from the other end of the line. The police know he's missing, Derek said after ending the call. They've issued a BOLO alert for this vehicle. BOLO, be on the lookout. Marcus knew that meant every law enforcement officer in the region would be watching for Derek's SUV. What are we going to do? I don't know. If I turn around and take Michael back, he'll definitely go to prison. If I keep driving, we'll eventually get caught. Michael had been listening to the conversation from the back of the SUV. Derek, he said weakly, let me turn myself in. I don't want you to go to jail because of me. But Derek was determined to get his brother to the treatment facility. Michael, you've been in jail before. It didn't help you get clean and it didn't help your mental health. This might be our only chance to get you real treatment. Marcus found himself in the middle of a family crisis with serious legal implications. Derek, is there any way to make this legal? Can you contact the treatment facility and have them work with law enforcement? I tried that already. The bureaucracy takes weeks, and Michael needed help immediately. Derek explained that his brother's condition had been deteriorating rapidly, and waiting for official approval might have meant waiting until it was too late. I had to choose between following the law and saving my brother's life. But Marcus had an idea that might solve everyone's problems. What if we don't run from the police? What if we call them ourselves and explain the situation? Derek looked at Marcus like he was insane. They'll arrest me and take Michael back to jail. Maybe. Or maybe, if we're proactive about it, they'll work with us to find a solution. Marcus had learned during his travels that law enforcement officers were often more reasonable than people expected, especially when families were trying to do the right thing. Derek, you're not a criminal. You're a brother trying to help someone who's sick. That has to count for something. Derek was hesitant, but Michael supported Marcus's suggestion. Marcus is right, Michael said. I don't want to be the reason you ruin your life. After much internal debate, Derek agreed to call the police themselves. The conversation with law enforcement was tense but productive. Derek explained the situation honestly, providing documentation about Michael's mental health history and the treatment facility in California. Officer, I know I broke protocol, but my brother needed immediate help and the system was failing him. The officer Derek spoke with agreed to contact a supervisor and see if they could work out an arrangement that would get Michael the treatment he needed without charging Derek with a crime. Stay where you are. We're sending someone to talk to you in person. An hour later, a state trooper and a mental health crisis counselor arrived at the scenic overlook where Derek had pulled over. But their arrival led to an unexpected development. The mental health counselor, after speaking with Michael for 20 minutes, determined that Derek had been right about his brother's need for immediate treatment. This young man is in genuine psychiatric crisis. Putting him in jail right now could actually make his condition worse. The state trooper, Sergeant Williams, had dealt with similar situations before. We see this a lot. Families trying to navigate a system that isn't designed to handle mental health emergencies effectively. Sergeant Williams contacted the district attorney's office and the treatment facility in California to see if they could arrange a legal transport. The result was better than anyone had hoped. Mr. Derek, the DA's office has agreed to modify your brother's custody arrangement. He can go to the treatment facility in California, but he'll be considered to be serving his sentence through a mental health court program. Derek nearly collapsed with relief. So, he gets treatment instead of jail time, and you won't be charged with anything as long as you cooperate with the official transport arrangements. The crisis counselor arranged for Michael to be transferred to an ambulance that would take him directly to the California facility, with proper legal authorization and medical supervision. But the resolution revealed something important about Derek's character. Sergeant Williams, Derek said, I want you to know that I never intended to break the law. I was just desperate to help my brother. We understand. And, honestly, your brother is lucky to have someone who cares enough to take risks for his well-being. Sergeant Williams explained that many families in similar situations simply give up and let their mentally ill relatives disappear into the criminal justice system. What you did was dangerous and technically illegal, but it was also an act of love. As the ambulance prepared to transport Michael to California, he had a final conversation with Derek and Marcus. Derek, thank you for not giving up on me. I know I've put you through hell for the past few years. You're my brother. That's what family does. Michael turned to Marcus. And thank you for convincing Derek to call the police. If we had kept running, this probably would have ended badly. Marcus realized that his hitchhiking experience had evolved into something much more significant than just getting a ride. Michael, I hope the treatment helps. You deserve to get your life back. As the ambulance drove away, Sergeant Williams had some final advice for Derek. Next time, and hopefully there won't be a next time, call us first. We have procedures for mental health emergencies that don't involve breaking the law. Derek nodded. I will. I just panicked when I saw how bad his condition was getting. That's understandable. But there are people trained to handle these situations safely and legally. Marcus learned that most communities have crisis intervention teams specifically designed to help families navigate mental health emergencies without resorting to desperate measures. Derek offered to continue driving Marcus to Grand Junction, but Marcus had a different idea. Derek, you've been through an incredible ordeal today. Why don't you go home, get some rest, and let me find another ride? Are you sure? I feel like I owe you for helping me think through this situation rationally. You don't owe me anything. You did the right thing for your brother, and that took courage. Marcus realized that Derek's willingness to risk everything for his brother's well-being was actually inspiring, even if his methods had been questionable. I hope Michael gets the help he needs. Me too. And Marcus, thank you for not freaking out when you realized what was happening. A lot of people would have demanded to be let out of the car immediately. Marcus thought about that as Derek drove away. It was true that discovering someone in the back of a vehicle would normally be terrifying. But Marcus had learned to distinguish between dangerous situations and desperate situations. Derek hadn't been a kidnapper or human trafficker. He had been a brother watching someone he loved spiral into mental illness and addiction, trying to save him from a system that seemed designed to make things worse rather than better. The sounds from the trunk that had initially alarmed Marcus had actually been Michael trying to communicate his discomfort and confusion, not cries for help from a victim. As Marcus waited for his next ride, he reflected on the complex ethical questions Derek's situation had raised. Was it ever acceptable to break the law to help someone you love? Derek had technically committed several crimes by removing Michael from police custody and transporting him without authorization. But Derek's actions had ultimately led to a better outcome for Michael than strict adherence to legal procedures would have achieved. Marcus realized that family loyalty sometimes requires people to make difficult choices between following rules and doing what they believe is right. 2 hours later, an elderly couple picked Marcus up and drove him safely to Grand Junction. During the ride, he told them about his experience with Derek and Michael. That poor family, the woman said. Mental illness is so difficult to deal with, especially when the person won't accept help voluntarily. Her husband nodded. We went through something similar with our son 15 years ago. Sometimes the system works, and sometimes families have to find creative solutions. Marcus learned that Derek and Michael's situation was far from unique. Many families struggle with the gap between what mentally ill family members need and what the legal system is designed to provide. The important thing is that the brother didn't give up, the woman continued. A lot of people would have just let him go to jail and hoped for the best. 6 months later, Marcus received an unexpected email from Derek. Marcus, I wanted to update you on Michael's progress. The treatment center in California was exactly what he needed. He's been clean for 4 months now, and his mental health has stabilized significantly. Derek explained that Michael was participating in a residential program that addressed both his addiction and his psychiatric condition simultaneously. He's learned coping strategies for managing his symptoms, and he's been able to stay medication compliant. More importantly, Michael was taking responsibility for his actions and working to make amends for the problems his illness had caused. He's written letters to the people he hurt during his psychotic episode, and he's participating in a victim impact program. But Derek had more news to share. The mental health court program worked so well for Michael that our county is expanding it to help other families in similar situations. Derek had become an advocate for mental health court programs, speaking to law enforcement and judicial officials about the importance of treatment over incarceration for people with serious mental illness. I've learned that what happened to us, the desperation, the feeling like we had no legal options, happens to hundreds of families every year. Derek was working with organizations that help families navigate mental health crises without resorting to illegal transport or other desperate measures. We're trying to create better systems so other brothers don't have to choose between breaking the law and watching their siblings deteriorate. Marcus realized that his hitchhiking experience had connected him to a much larger issue about how society handles mental illness and family responsibility. A year later, Marcus visited Michael at a halfway house in Colorado, where he was transitioning back to independent living. "Marcus, Derek told me how you convinced him to call the police instead of trying to run. That probably saved both our lives." Michael explained that the treatment program had given him tools for managing his mental illness that he had never had access to before. "I still have bad days, but now I know how to ask for help before things get dangerous." Michael was working part-time and taking classes to become a peer counselor for other people dealing with mental illness and addiction. "I want to use my experience to help other families avoid the crisis that Derek and I went through." But Michael also wanted to address the ethical complexity of Derek's actions. What Derek did was technically wrong, but it was also the only thing that worked. The system had failed me multiple times, and he was watching me die slowly. Michael's perspective highlighted the difficult choices families face when legal systems and medical systems don't coordinate effectively. "I don't think Derek should have had to choose between following the law and saving my life. But when that's the choice, I'm grateful he chose me." Marcus learned that Michael's case had become a model for mental health court programs in several states, demonstrating how treatment could be more effective than incarceration for people with serious mental illness. The silver SUV that had initially seemed like it might be transporting a kidnapping victim had actually been carrying a brother's desperate attempt to save someone he loved from a system that was failing them both. Derek's willingness to risk his own freedom for Michael's well-being had ultimately led to policy changes that would help other families facing similar crises. And Marcus's decision to stay calm and help Derek think through his options rationally had contributed to an outcome that saved 2 lives and improved mental health services for an entire community. The sounds from the trunk that had seemed so alarming had actually been the beginning of a story about family loyalty, systemic reform, and the power of human connection in crisis situations. Sometimes the most dangerous-seeming situation is actually someone's desperate attempt to do the right thing in a world that doesn't always make it easy to help the people you love. Sometimes the person who appears to be breaking the law is actually trying to fix a system that has already broken. And sometimes a hitchhiker's willingness to listen and help problem solve can turn a potentially tragic situation into a catalyst for positive change that extends far beyond the original crisis. Marcus learned that the difference between a criminal and a hero often comes down to understanding the motivation behind someone's actions and helping them find legal ways to achieve their legitimate goals. The sounds from Derek's trunk had been asking for help, not from a victim of a crime, but from a family struggling with inadequate mental health resources and trying to save a life within a system that wasn't designed to make that easy. In the end, everyone got the help they needed, and the experience led to improvements that would help countless other families facing similar challenges. But it all started with a hitchhiker who chose to listen instead of panic, and who helped a desperate brother realize that sometimes the best way to break the rules is to work within them. 3 years after that night in the mountains, Marcus received an invitation that would bring the story full circle. Derek and Michael were hosting a fundraising event for the mental health advocacy organization they had founded together. The invitation included a personal note from Derek. "We couldn't have done any of this without your calm voice that night when everything seemed hopeless." Marcus drove to Denver for the event, curious to see how far the brothers had come since their crisis on Highway 7. The venue was packed with families, law enforcement officers, medical professionals, and politicians, all united around the goal of improving mental health crisis intervention. Michael took the stage as the keynote speaker, looking healthy and confident in a way that would have been unimaginable during his transport in Derek's SUV. 3 years ago, I was a danger to myself and others, Michael began. My brother saved my life by taking a risk that could have destroyed his own future. Michael's speech focused on the gaps in mental health services that force families into impossible situations. No family should have to choose between following the law and getting their loved one life-saving treatment. But the most powerful moment came when Derek joined Michael on stage. "The night we met Marcus, I thought I was out of options," Derek said. "I was prepared to become a fugitive if that's what it took to get my brother help." Derek explained how Marcus's intervention had changed their trajectory from desperation to collaboration with the system. "Marcus showed us that sometimes the most radical thing you can do is trust the process and work for change from within." The organization Derek and Michael had founded was now operating in 12 states, providing crisis intervention services that bridge the gap between law enforcement and mental health care. "We've helped over 500 families navigate mental health emergencies without anyone having to break the law or watch their loved one deteriorate in jail." After the event, the three men sat together at a quiet restaurant, reflecting on how a chance encounter had led to systemic change. "Marcus," Michael said, "did you ever think about how different things might have been if you had gotten scared and demanded to be let out of the car?" Marcus considered the question. "I think about it sometimes. But I've learned that most people aren't actually dangerous, they're just in situations they don't know how to handle." Derek nodded. "That's exactly right. I wasn't a criminal that night. I was just a brother who had run out of conventional options." The conversation turned to the broader implications of their experience. How many other people are out there right now making desperate choices because the systems that are supposed to help them are failing? Michael wondered. Derek had been tracking statistics since founding their organization. "More than you'd want to know. We get calls every week from families who are considering doing exactly what I did. And now they have legal alternatives," Marcus pointed out. "Because of what happened with us, yes. But there are still gaps in the system that force people into impossible choices." Marcus learned that their organization was working on legislation that would create standardized mental health crisis protocols across all 50 states. The goal is to make sure that no family ever has to choose between following the law and saving someone's life. As they prepared to leave the restaurant, Derek had one more thing to share. "Marcus, I want you to know that your decision to stay in that car changed more than just Michael's life or mine. Every family we've helped since then owes something to your willingness to listen instead of panic." Marcus felt the weight of that responsibility and privilege. "I was just trying to do the right thing in a confusing situation." "That's exactly what makes the difference," Michael replied. "Most people would have assumed the worst and acted out of fear. You assumed the best and acted out of compassion," Derek added. "And that assumption of good intentions is what allowed us to find a solution that worked for everyone." The drive home gave Marcus time to reflect on the ripple effects of individual choices. A simple decision to trust his instincts about Derek's character had led to policy changes that would help thousands of families. A willingness to suggest cooperation instead of confrontation had turned a potential tragedy into a catalyst for systemic reform. Marcus realized that his years of hitchhiking had taught him to see people in crisis rather than people who were dangerous, and that perspective had made all the difference in Derek and Michael's story. The sounds from the trunk that had initially alarmed him had become the foundation for a movement that was changing how society handles mental health emergencies. Sometimes the most important conversation you'll ever have happens in the front seat of a stranger's car on a dark mountain highway. Sometimes the most significant change you'll ever help create starts with choosing curiosity over fear and compassion over judgment. And sometimes a hitchhiker's willingness to stay calm in an uncertain situation can save lives and change laws in ways that extend far beyond anything anyone could have imagined on that night when the sounds from the trunk first asked for help.